Good morning, Exeter. Good morning. My name is Graham Rutledge. I'm a four-year senior in Wentworth Hall. Today is my great pleasure to introduce my father, Dr. Robert Rutledge, a radiation oncologist who specializes in pediatric, prostate, and breast cancers from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Dr. Rutledge completed his undergraduate degree at the University of Toronto in computer science in just 2 years. After that, Dr. Rutledge continued on at U of T to study medicine, and during that time, he met my mother, who was studying law. Aww. Dr. Rutledge then did his residency at the University of Ottawa and returned to the University of Toronto to do a fellowship before moving to Halifax to work as a radiation oncologist and raise 2 sons with his wife, Kara. Through his successful journey, Dr. Rutledge found that there was more to medicine than just identifying the best treatment and then administering it. He found that there was a spiritual side to healing that couldn't be ignored. This prompted Dr. Rutledge to found a charity called Healing Cancer, which holds weekend retreats and public talks to help and inform those affected by cancer. Although Dr. Rutledge loves his work, radiation oncology is a sad field, which left little compassion for his children at home. After meeting a young boy with incurable cancer, for instance, Dad had little sympathy for me when he came home to find I had a broken arm or a nosebleed. Dad served as medic on my football team in grade 5, and every time he was called out to examine an injured player, he would go to the kid lying on the field, and regardless of the intensity of that player's groans, he would always start out by folding his arms and saying, "How about you get up?" Despite all these amazing accomplishments, his most impressive did not require a university education to acquire. Dr. Rutledge has an annoyingly uncanny ability to hum rap. Like, how is that even possible? And this morning he was humming Sean Paul's Get Busy.
Yeah.
But perhaps his most jaw-dropping accomplishment lies in his striking resemblance to his gorgeous son, my brother Jeremy.
Yeah.
Today, my father and I compete fiercely in any way we can, and despite his slight frame and weak mind, I am reluctant to say he usually comes out on top. In all seriousness, my father is a very special person with a big heart and a burning passion for helping people. Dad, you've been a better father than I ever could have asked for.
Thank you.
Exeter, please join me in welcoming Dr. Rutledge.
So I'm both kind of nervous and really excited to be here. I will hope to share some of my life journey with you and the lessons I've garnered as a radiation oncologist and how you might apply that to your life here in Exeter and beyond. I grew up in a small city in northern Canada, very friendly but insular. My mom was an elementary school teacher. My dad had a grade 8 education and joined the military at age 18, worked his way up through being an officer and so on. But his priority was making sure his kids had a great education. And from about my prep year in high school, I had this overwhelmingly strong desire to become a physician. And I was a mega keener. I worked extremely hard. Yes, I did the sports things and the volunteering, et cetera, et cetera. I even remember orientation week of university, cracking open my bio syllabus and actually starting to read, and a couple of the seniors seeing me and laughing at me for being such a keener. And I couldn't have cared less. I was just so determined to get into medicine. And I, luckily after a couple of years, got there, went to University of Toronto, very kind of traditional medical school. It's all about kind of physical care at that point. Gain the knowledge, make the diagnosis, apply the physical medicine. And I yearned in my heart and my soul for something much deeper. And I started to study psychiatry and working with people with addictions. And then I had this life-altering experience where the book chooses the reader. You know, the book kind of falls off the shelf into your lap. And the book that I read was called Love, Medicine, and Miracles by Dr. Bernie Siegel. And Bernie was a cancer surgeon at Yale. He was also a pioneer of support groups. And he wrote this book about his exceptional cancer patients The ones who did way better than expected, who got through their treatment miraculously, whose tumor shrunk, who far outlived their expectations of their physicians and so on, spontaneous remission and so on. And what Bernie noticed was that there were certain personality traits of these remarkable patients. And fast forward 20 years, actually the science of positive psychology shows that the happiest people also have many of these traits. And I want to have you reflect on some of these traits in your life as well. So for instance, Bernie's exceptional patients were truly able to accept their diagnosis. And when I talk about acceptance, I'm not talking about resignation. I'm not talking about giving up, abdicating your responsibility. Acceptance is more like looking at the reality of the circumstance as your starting point. And for a corollary for you in your young lives, you can also learn to accept your emotional response, your emotional position in some sense. So what I've noticed is some days I'm feeling great, other days I'm feeling lousy. And what I'm asking is to consider being okay with those difficult emotions. When you're feeling anxious, instead of saying I shouldn't feel this way and kind of fighting with reality, let that be your starting place and then work forward from there. So acceptance was the first A. The second one, which should be more obvious to your life, is this idea of authenticity. And it's the idea of being able to listen to that kind of inner wisdom, that inner heart within yourself that tells you what's right for you. Letting go of societal expectations, even letting go of what your family and your friends expect of you, but actually listening to your heart and making your own decisions. The third A is action, and there's this kind of tension between acceptance and action. And we have to manifest our spirits. We have to make a decision to actually go forward in the world. And I want to kind of hats off to Graham. I mean, so for instance, working with the emotions of going into an exam or a presentation that you have or into a really important sports event. And the acceptance piece is to say, yes, I'm feeling nervous, I'm feeling anxious. But the action piece, which Graham does extremely well, is actually to reframe that and to say, I'm going to use the energy of my nervousness to focus myself. And because of that, I really think Graham is a big game player. The more important the game is, the more he ups his game. And that's because he's able to reframe and take action with his own energy. Yeah. One click there for you. The fourth principle that I've noticed, and it sounds paradoxical, is the remarkable cancer survivors no longer put their energy into things they can't control. So they no longer view recurrence of cancer or even death as a failure. Instead, they're putting their energies into things they can control, like connecting with people, finding meaning, manifesting their spirit in the world. And that has a profound effect as well. And so as you're moving forward, the lesson for you is not to grasp too much at the goal. Yes, it's great to have the vision, but it's the how you're getting there that is as important as what you are doing. So I read Bernie's book in the 80s, and I can remember crying and knowing in my heart that I really wanted to be an oncologist at that point. I wanted to run support groups. And I actually went to one of Bernie's weekends, New Haven, 1990, just before my internship. And I was sitting in the front row of like a gym auditorium, 180 people, almost all of them with a cancer diagnosis. And I was sitting there thinking, what great words of wisdom is Bernie Siegel going to offer the group? So this is a weekend retreat for these survivors. And he kind of comes up to the microphone, very plainly dressed. He says, hi, my name is Bernie Siegel. You, sir, can you please start us out? And 180 people stood up in turn and told some part of that story, their story. And the group listened, and there was this incredible feeling of compassion that was kind of enveloping the whole group. And I remember one guy who was there with his mom, and he was like crying, sobbing. His mom had ovarian cancer. Another woman had actually brought in a dead chicken, and when it came to her, she reached into her bag, she's like swinging it around. You have to use humor on the cancer journey. I think we all kind of laughed along with that. And by the time, yes, it's true. By the time I got up to the front row, and it was me, I kind of stood up back to the audience and said, I've learned more about the influence of cancer in a person's life in the last 2 hours than had in all of medical school. So The next, and I guess the reflection around that is your ability to listen, to simply be present. I mean, you're going to go into a lot of different new situations in the world, different organizations, and you can never go wrong by listening and trying to truly understand what's happening in the people that are there. And I really feel that most of my job as an oncologist is just that, trying to really figure out that human to human, who is this character in front of me, how can I serve them best? The second life-altering experience for me happened in the late 1990s. By that time I was an oncologist, young family, and I read a poster on the wall and it said, "Awaken Heart." And it was a advertisement for a mindfulness-based stress reduction course offered by a local psychotherapist. And something deep within my psyche, deep within my spirit said, pay attention now. Like my spider senses were tingling. I have to meet this guy. And I was feeling a little bit rough at that point in my life, a little under the weather. So I actually phoned up, I scheduled myself to be, go to therapy with the psychotherapist. And quickly, Tim, who's a Buddhist in the Halifax community, I gelled. We quickly understood that we were going to work together. We're coming up to our 50th weekend retreat next weekend. But Tim also taught me how to meditate. And I want to offer you my experience of meditation because it can demystify what this is all about. And so most mornings, including this morning, I go downstairs, I go into one room, and I sit on my couch, or my pillows. And within about 3 seconds of starting that, I'm starting to think about what I need to do today. Here are the meetings. Actually, this morning I was like almost composing my speech. And at some point in time, I'm realizing that I'm thinking. And I bring my attention back to breathing. And about 2 seconds after that, I'm starting to think about what happened yesterday. I was at the departmental meeting and there was a silence. So I cracked that joke and nobody laughed. Like, why don't you shut up? And at some point in time, I realize that I'm thinking, and I bring my attention back to breathing. And it goes, like, this is talking dozens of times. I'm 15 years out meditating, and it's all meditation. And luckily, at maybe the 20-minute point, it's like, sinking into my body, relaxation response. I know it changes my brain, and I could quote you a lot of scientific literature, but I'll tell you my own personal experience, that when I'm having that meditation, I'm going into the world, I'm in a different place. I'm more calm, I'm more efficient, I'm more compassionate, I'm able to look in that person's eyes and really connect with them. But I also talk to you about meditation because it brings in the idea of spirit, that there is an element of our humanness that transcends body-mind. So I can see that there's body there, and I can see breath, and I can see my emotional energy, that kind of life force energy. And some mornings I'm feeling lousy, some mornings I'm feeling great. It's just a fluctuating picture. I can definitely now see that there's this chattering mind that's coming back and forth. But there's an observation consciousness. There's something that holds that picture, that has a different energy in a different space. And I can be feeling lousy and yet have that feeling of being held within awareness. So that to me it points to this kind of idea of spirit as well. And I'm going to get back to this idea of being able to hold that presence as a way to be with people. The next story I want to talk to you about touches my heart. And it's the idea of being comfortable with your own distressing emotions, of being willing to stay with the difficult stuff and not walk away. I walked into the ward one day, maybe 12 or 15 years ago, and saw this very unusual scene. It was a mom who was cradling her daughter, and the daughter that was hugging the mom, and the mom was like sobbing, 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 and the little girl who was 8 years old was saying, "It's going to be okay, Mommy. It's going to be okay." And I finally got to meet Tara. She had a very, very bad brain tumor that was spread down to her spine. I was going to give her radiation treatment. And simply being with her, just looking into her eyes, like the world falls away and time comes to a standstill. This is like the wise soul in this 8-year-old body. And usually we try to bribe the kids into staying still for the radiotherapy. Tara was more motivated to give back herself. And she had gone to Walmart, had a picture of herself in this beautiful wedding veil, and I just saw that picture and it just melted my heart because I just thought, no, this girl's not going to make it. Her chances are just so low. And at the end of treatment, she gave me actually a dream catcher, the little web with a feather that helps you remember your good dreams and warns away the bad dreams. And I had like tears on my cheeks at that point, thinking this little girl, knows the perfect present for me. And then into follow-up, I really felt like I gave her too much radiation, kind of the dimness in her eyes, or her eyes began more dim. Her mom was super happy, and we're going along 3 years, 4 years. And if you get through those first 2 years, your chance of cure is really high. She dies suddenly, and there's going to be an autopsy. And something within me said, go there. Don't run away from the difficult emotions. And so I went to the autopsy and had her brain in my hands. And to this day, there's no congruence in this moment. I cannot make a good story out of this. Yes, I could say her spirit is still with me and so on. The fact of the story is that I was willing to go there. I was willing to suffer my grief. I was willing to feel awful. Like walking, you're coming into the doorway, you're about to talk to the young mother. Cancer's now spread to her brain. I'm going to tell her she's got incurable cancer. And I knew very early in my career that I was going to walk in there and I was going to sit down and I was going to stay and I was going to suffer through it. I was going to feel the emotions and not stay. And I think I've become more comfortable. I think I've been able to hold a greater space and be present and connect and really serve that person because of going through the difficulties, not walking away from it. I want to finish with a couple of ideas, and that is perhaps somebody in your life gets a serious cancer diagnosis. And it sounds a little bit morbid to talk about this, but I want to give you just some general advice and partly honor my mom, because my mom's not here to see Graham graduate and so on. My mom was 79 when she developed these kind of strange symptoms. She was fantastic shape. Her mom had lived to 110. And she had these kind of acidy stomachs and shock syndromes. We quickly found that she had a tumor the size of a grapefruit in her brain. And as an oncologist, I knew that this meant a year of life at best. And so the first point for you, thinking about maybe a loved one in your life at some point in time gets a cancer diagnosis, go early and go often. And so for my mom, I know it's a 7-hour journey from East Coast to West Coast to see her. So I was there just prior to her brain surgery, and I had and she's on the gurney just outside the operating suite, and I had my hands in her feet and kind of sending this kind of loving energy to her, just prior to the operation. And I was there afterwards in the recovery period when this little nurse so tenderly held her from the bed into the chair, and it just melted my heart. I just understood at that moment how vulnerable the family members are. And I was there when she finished her radiotherapy and she wasn't well enough to go home, and I was so sad. I was leaving that day, driving her over to the nursing home to let her off. And I'm going to cry here, and that's totally fine. Let her off. And she goes in to the nursing home, and she sees this woman who's kind of hunched over, has bad arthritis, and she immediately goes right over to them. And the two of them are like holding hands, staring in each other's eyes, and they're smiling. My mom had volunteered and actually knew this woman, and these two became really, really good friends. And there's my mom in the last 2-3 months of her life, creating new friends and having greater connections. And I was just so pleased and saddened to see this moment. And I was there when she got really sick in the last couple months of her life, and I was there in the middle of the night having these conversations and really feeling like the spirits are melding at that point and telling her how much I love her and so on. It was just really touching. I was there during her last breath and going to her funeral. Funeral day was actually very much like this day. It was kind of the brightness of the West Coast sun coming through the fog and the two rainbows landing right on top of our car. So the takeaway point for you is go early and go often. And I know you're going to have busy lives. A lot of people are probably going to rely on you, or maybe a few people are going to really rely on you. But the work in those organizations can wait. Your family members, maybe not. They might die quickly, so go early and go often. The second bit of advice I'd offer you is to be honest, open, and authentic with your emotions. oftentimes when a loved one gets a cancer diagnosis, we're trying to be brave, put on a positive face. You guys stay positive when you have a cancer diagnosis, and it just doesn't work. Quick story, I'm going in to see a woman. She's in the bed, she's got an advanced cancer. I'm sitting down, talking to her. She says to me, "Don't tell my husband he has a cancer diagnosis because he can't handle it." I listen. I'm walking down the hallway, get pulled into the side room. The husband's there. The husband says, "Don't tell my wife she's got a cancer diagnosis, she can't handle it." Right? So it's that kind of breakdown in communication. And besides, you can't put on a brave face. You know, if it's a loved one, they can see through you. So it's just better to be open and honest and say, "I feel terrible, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do." And that's a kind of a smarter way to be with a family member. And the last thing I'm going to offer you as some advice is, and it sounds again really, really, really morbid around this, is to expect that sad things are going to happen in your lifetime. Expect the sad, expect the difficult. That is a part of life in some sense. And so, and I hope this is far, far, far into the future, but you know, you are going to say goodbye to your parents or your grandparents. If you live long enough and you get married, and you know, at some point you may say goodbye to your partner, or you maybe even a classmate. You know, maybe hopefully 60, 70 years from now you say goodbye to a classmate. The flip side of that, though, the flip side of that realization is that we can therefore appreciate our lives more right now, this very moment. That death is a natural part of life, makes life very precious and even sacred. And so we can appreciate what we have this very moment. You're here at Exeter. It's an amazing school. You're surrounded by so many great spirits, your classmates, the adults in your life here, and often there are many family members here as well. So this weekend, just take some time to cherish those moments and really appreciate that life is limited and beautiful and so on. So finish with just saying, bless you, bless each and every one of you. Thank you very much for your attention. Please have a sit. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take, I guess we got a couple minutes of questions, and I'm also happy to stay behind, but I mean, it would be wonderful if somebody had the bravery to ask a question now. Maybe somebody from the front row? Okay, go, thank you. To acceptance point. So the question was, how do we facilitate acceptance when those difficult things happen? And you know, I did kind of simplify it, because the first natural step is actually to mourn the loss. To mourn, oh, I wanted this to happen, but it didn't happen. And to feel the disappointment and not to resist it at some point in time. And then the second point is to have that kind of bigger philosophy. Difficult things happen. I can't always expect that things are going to go my way. I know I can make good out of the situation even though I'm really disappointed. And so acceptance has to do with reframing and finding a new direction and putting your spirit into what the situation is. It's response that's really most important. Can we have another question? Great, please.
How important do you feel that the personal relationship in healthcare is important towards the efficacy of healthcare?
Yeah, so the question is around how important is relationship to efficacy within the healthcare situation. Well, I believe in empowering people. I'll give you the quick, which is integrative care, getting the best care from the medical system, which is usually mostly physical, and then empowering body, mind, and spirit. And then to be able to facilitate this part, which is the proactive part, actually helps to have that relationship and so on. But people, I also want you to kind of walk away with this idea that people can heal even as their x-rays are getting worse. You can heal your life in different ways by connecting with family members, by growing through psychological, spiritual issues for yourself. But You know, people respond to relationships. We're human. That is the takeaway. We're human. We want to connect eye to eye, heart to heart in order to really facilitate that. So, wonderful. Peter?
To what extent do you prescribe meditation
The other right. So my day-to-day, I'm a radiation oncologist. It's within that system itself. It probably looks like I'm doing the same sorts of things as the other radiation oncologists, trying to figure out how I can serve this person, human to human, physician to human, specialist to human. So I'm trying to connect that way. And the spiritual work, the psychological work here obviously influences me as a person. But if you just kind of videotape me, I would probably act in a very similar way, willing to ask those difficult questions. And so one question that I ask people is, what's the most difficult thing about this? And to really go into the difficult, dark stuff and not shy away from it, and it changes the culture. But essentially, I make a diagnosis, contour, radiate, et cetera, and I love, love, love my job. So I think that's about it in terms of timing. Thank you so much for your attention. Happy to chat with you afterwards.